My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. Today's goal is to give you a crash course in Matrix, help you understand the software, help you understand how to get started, and then how to use it to become more effective at prioritizing tasks, projects, and email. What I want to get started with is a quote that I really like because it helps us understand the challenges that we all face. And product and so Tony Robbins says that productivity is not about time management, but it's about misplaced attention. Now, this quote resonates with me a lot because for me, I do a lot of things. I have so many things that I want to accomplish, so many different goals and so forth. The challenge isn't around how to spend my time, it's around ensuring that I'm working on the right things. And so when we think about part of Matrix, and when we think about productivity software in general, one of the things I want you to keep in the back of your mind is that how does this software help me not just to do the tasks that I do, but to choose which task to work on. And that's sort of the end goal of what part of Matrix is able to do. Let's talk about the goals for today. First, help you understand the basics of Matrix, and then understand and apply what's called the Eisenhower Matrix. And then I'll also walk you through how to prioritize your tasks, projects, and emails, and then how to use basic collaboration features to prioritize team tasks. So then you can get to that alignment on the most critical tasks across your organization, and then also learn how to use Matrix and Microsoft Teams and Outlook. The one thing I do want to mention is that Matrix is a Microsoft 365 security certified software. In fact, it's the only security certified software across Teams, Outlook, and web. So if you do happen to use Microsoft Teams and Outlook, it's almost a no-brainer to use Matrix there as well. In terms of what happens over the next 30 days. Now, I assume that vast majority of you have not really used Matrix before or is relatively new to Matrix. So when I think about, how to get the most out of Matrix, I see it as three distinct stages. The first is getting started, right? That's today. So, hopefully after today's webinar and presentation, the first thing you do is install Matrix, create your first personal and team projects, and then start reviewing what's important and urgent in the tasks that you have. The most important thing for us when we think about prioritization is just to put it down onto something tangible. Now, for me, I have a notebook with me. I write down my stuff all the time. I know a lot of you probably do the same thing. And just the fact that when we write things down, it makes it tangible, helps us a lot to think about how we should spend our time. And Matrix as a software is no different. So for day one, essentially just writing down what the status quo is will really help you troubleshoot or think about how you spend your time and what your priorities are. And then over the next 5 days, it's really about getting comfortable with the Matrix software, about starting to review the priorities with your coworkers, making sure that everyone's on the same page, and then you start reprioritizing your personal tasks and goals. And it's really as simple as looking at your priorities and determining whether or not you're working on the right things, right? Let's just say you say something's extremely important and urgent. Did you end up working on it over the next 5 days? And if you don't, why not? And those are the questions that we always have to ask ourselves. And I think that the second part about using Matrix is really around reorienting yourself and then also checking on yourself, right? And so making sure that you actually do the things you say you would do. So that's essentially your first week. And then over the course of 30 days or so, as you use Matrix, it's really about you taking control. And that's around not just prioritizing your personal tasks, but really talking about the team and organizational goals, right? Yes, you're working on the right things for today, but is that the right thing for this quarter, for this month, for this year, for the next 5 years, and so forth? And then also create a habit of prioritizing tasks and emails, and then eliminate time wasters. So make sure that you focus on the right task. One of the biggest challenges that I see over and over again is it's not about the software. Yes, you're here because you want to learn about Matrix, but honestly, it works just as well using a bunch of sticky notes or a piece of paper or drawing on a whiteboard. So really, it's about using a system and being consistent around it. All Matrix does is make it so then it's actually really easy to communicate with the rest of your team. So what is Matrix? Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software that helps at 3 different levels. At the individual level, we help prioritize your most important tasks and emails. And so, in my opinion, that's the most important, right? When we think about prioritization, you first have to be in control of your own priorities. And so, if we can help you prioritize your tasks, then everything else will sort of fall into place. What happens though is that as you prioritize your task in Matrix, you're able to take that and communicate to the rest of your team. So let's just say you're a manager, you're able to go and tell your direct reports, hey, by the way, these are our top priorities. Make sure that you're working on those right things. Or if you're an individual contributor, you're able to work on your task. And then when people assign you things, you can say, wait a minute, these are my top priorities. If you want me to do this, what am I getting rid of? Right. And so that's how you can actually keep everyone aligned. And then what happens is that as your teams, the various different teams across your organization are using Matrix, we help create what's called a single source of truth. One of the most important things about Matrix is that it offers one centralized place for everyone to be able to come to and know what are the priorities for the organization, the priorities for the team, your personal priorities, and then you can have those meaningful discussions when you disagree. And so, I think that people tend to look at software as just either something that solves all your problems or something that doesn't do anything. And I would say the reality is it's sort of like somewhere in the middle. So when you use Matrix, it's only as good as your process. And it's really only as good as how much time and investment that you put into it. So whether you use Matrix or something else, just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, let's talk about the core concept behind Matrix. There's a quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. Now, what I really like about this quote is that it helps us understand that the task and decisions are not one-dimensional, right? They're multi-dimensional. So imagine this. Imagine I ask you to write down 15 or 20 things that you have to work on, either both personal and or work. So now I ask you the next question, which is, what will you work on next? So what do? Do you pick the thing at the top of the list or the bottom of the list? If it's at the top of the list, it's because it's the first thing that came to your mind. Now, is that important? Not always. Or is at the bottom? It's like that last thing, like you're struggling to come up with that 15th item. So then do you work on that? Or do you choose something random in the middle? So as you can see, when we create our task list, when we create the things that we have to do, we tend to have no real systematic way to decide what to work on. So now a different approach is take those 15 things and ask the questions: is this item important, and is this item urgent? So now what you have is what's called the Eisenhower Matrix. So instead of having a task list, you have a bucket, these series of buckets. And so you have the important and urgent tasks. That's your high priority task. The important but not urgent, that's your medium priority. Your urgent but not important, those are low priorities. And then lastly, you shouldn't have anything that's not important and not urgent, right? And so that's your uncategorized, your catch-all. So imagine you take those 15 things, they first belong in the quadrant 4, an uncategorized bucket. Then you start moving them around and say, you know what, this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and so forth. Now, one thing that's really interesting here is the differences between medium and low priority. People tend to struggle here because they tend to put the urgent but not important task in quadrant 2. They think those are the medium priority tasks. And I would argue it's the opposite, right? The problem with the urgent task is that it tends to draw your attention away from the things that matter. It's that last email that you got, right? It's that person who keeps on nagging you over and over again to do something, even when that task is not important. And so you end up spending all your time and resources thinking about tasks that don't really matter. Instead, when you have extra bandwidth, not working on the important and urgent tasks, you should be planning for the tasks that are important but not urgent. Those are the things in quadrant 2, the medium priority. So you take those 15 things and you put into these four buckets. Now, the next thing I want you to do is that you take this and you go to your coworkers and you ask them to do the same exercise, and then you compare notes. So the one thing that's really interesting when this happens is that it creates alignment within your team almost right away. The reason is simple. We all sort of have an internal method for which we prioritize our tasks. We think about it and we're like, you know what? I know this is the most important task, but it's not always guaranteed that our coworkers are on the same page. And so we think we're on the same page, but when you put it down into this 2 by 2 matrix and you can't have more than a fourth of your task in quadrant one and a fourth of your task in quadrant two, suddenly you realize, wait a minute, we have some misaligned priorities. And so success from using Matrix isn't about finding out what everyone agrees on. It's discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. So regardless of whether or not you use our software moving forward, this is an exercise I strongly recommend that everyone partake in. It's so powerful because it helps us just get to alignment really, really quickly within the team, but also with ourselves. For me, I literally have thousands of tasks to choose from to work on it every single day, and I get hundreds of emails. There's just so many things I have to deal with. Understanding where I can have the most impact is extremely important. So I hope that you keep this in the back of your mind as you think about our software and how to put it into practice. So I do want to mention that our website, affluence.com/webinars, is where I'll post this recording. And then also that's where you can see other recordings. We also covered sort of other topics as well, in more detail, such as email management or using templates and so forth. Now with that, let's go ahead and show you how to put this into practice. So I'm going to show you now a demo of Matrix. Here I open up my Matrix. One thing I want to mention is that Matrix is ubiquitous in the sense that it works on every single platform. So Matrix works on the web, works on the Mac natively as a Mac app, on Windows as a native Windows app, inside Microsoft Teams, inside Outlook, we have Chrome extension, Gmail extension, and so forth. So what that means is that Matrix is there wherever you are, right? If you're out and about, you have your phone, you can access Matrix, and you can actually prioritize your tasks. You know exactly what you have to do. So anyways, here I have the web app, and let's talk about the structure of Matrix. On the left-hand side, you have projects. So projects can be thought of in a couple different ways. There's three types of projects. The first is what's called a transient project. That means it has a start and an end. So let's just say if you're working on a construction project over the course of 12 months, right, you have a series of tasks, and from those tasks, you have a start to an end. So that's a transient project. You might have a persistent project, one that sticks around for a while. So for example, here I have a project selected called My Personal Priorities. Well, that doesn't have a start or an end. It's an ever-growing project, in fact. And the same thing happens to other type of projects where you might have one for your goals or managing a process or something like that. For example, at our organization, we have projects for each of our application. So our project for Mac app, our project for Windows app, our project for the web app, and so forth. So that's how you can think about projects. And then the third type of projects are what's called repeating or recurring projects. So as an example, let's just say every time you onboard an employee, you want to have a set of priorities for them to work on. Very straightforward. Got to get this document in, got to go through this training process. Then you can actually use Matrix to create those recurring templates. Or it could be a customer onboarding system. So for example, every time you onboard an enterprise customer or a supplier, you might have a series of actions you have to do either internally or externally. And so that's the third type of projects. So here I have a project selected, and every single project has this 4 quadrants. And that's sort of the point, which is you're able to prioritize within the context of every single project. So let's give an example. Why don't I go and say follow up with webinar participants? So now this is a simple task that I have to do. But one of the things I can do in Matrix is I can use what's called natural language. So I'll go ahead and say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. Now, when I press enter there, Matrix automatically creates a task for me. But furthermore, what it does is when I click on this task, it opens the item details. And because I said due tomorrow at 2 p.m., our system processes that and sets the due date for me automatically tomorrow, 2 p.m. my local time. So when you create tasks in Matrix, You don't have to go and, click on a button and click on a calendar, click on a time and so forth. We streamline that whole process just to make it easier for you. And now when you look at the item details, there's a couple of things I can do. I can go ahead and add an icon. So maybe an icon that is related to email here. And then I can go and I can assign this task to another person. So let's just say if I need my coworker to take over the task, and then I'm going to say that this effort will take, 1 hour or something like that. And now I already have a due date, I have effort, and in fact, I could make sure that, we do follow up with webinar participants. I'm going to say remind me daily. And so now on a daily basis, Matrix will remind me to work on this task until it's done. That's a very, very straightforward way to create a simple task in Matrix. Now, do you need to set these parameters? No. In fact, in my opinion, the most important features in Matrix are the following. First, you have to put items in the right quadrants, right? That's the number one goal. So if you did nothing else, imagine this. I can click on that button and it can hide the entire item details. And now I just have the 4 quadrants just to see the tasks that I have. That's the most straightforward way. But in terms of features, the 2 other important features, in my opinion, are due date. If you want to think about tasks that are important and urgent, you want to know when they're due, even if the date is wrong, right? It is very important just to actually put a date to it because it makes it tangible. One of the challenges I face personally is that if I don't have it with a due date and I don't have it on my calendar, then how can I put some mind share towards it? Because I will get my calendar filled up with everything else. And, my attention will be pulled to other tasks that come onto my calendar. So therefore, my perspective is if you have tasks that are important and urgent, make sure you set those due dates. And so not all tasks have to have due dates, but certainly do the ones that matter to you. And then the other is reminders. And it's really interesting. Here's the difference between the two. Let's just say if I have a task and it's due in 1 week. So 1 week comes and then it takes me, 2 days to work on. But now that day, the due date has arrived and I haven't gotten started. There's no way I can actually work on something that will take me 2 days in one day. And then not only that, I haven't thought about it at all. And the reason is this. The reason is I'm so busy doing all these other things, right? And so therefore, the way you use reminders is to make sure that it stays top of mind. Let me give you sort of a different example. You get a lot of emails, I imagine. And then guess what? Someone will send you an email and it's a very important email, but they send you one time. One time, that's it, right? And whether or not you see it or not, who knows? Another person sends you an email that's not important at all. It's probably like a sales email or even a spam email, but they follow up every single day. Which one will you likely respond to first or think about, or even respond to? And it's more likely that the latter, the less important email, but the one that keeps on bothering you, um, taking up your mind share, that's the one we all end up spending time and resources on. And the same thing happens to our tasks, our projects, our goals. So therefore, the reminder system is sort of a way to overcome that by helping ensure that your most important tasks are top of mind. So when I create a reminder, what I like to do is I like to create that recurring reminder. So now if I have something that's truly important, yes, I have a due date, but I will also get a reminder from Matrix to work on it. So I talk about that a lot because, I think that if you walk away from today's webinar and you use just a few features in Matrix, I surely hope you use the due dates and the reminders in addition to the quadrants as a way to prioritize. Now, down below that, you have a chat section. Matrix let you chat within the context of a task. The reason is it keeps it within the context of that task, right? We all use so many communication software, but imagine if you are talking about a project that's very important, and then you have a meeting that's in person, you see someone down in the hallway, then you're sending messages on Microsoft Teams or Slack, you send text messages or have phone calls. Guess what? When you need to review everything that's been talked about in 6 months, you won't remember. And in fact, if you need to pull in somebody new, they have zero context. So the chat section is really just a place where you'd have communication around the context of that task. So then someone else, whoever comes into this task, will have a full history and understanding of all the priorities, all the due dates, all the changes, and so on. In the notes section, you can add basic notes to Matrix. You can also create subtasks. So for example, I can do, subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3, right? And you can decide what the subtasks are. And then as I mark each subtask as done, Matrix will actually just track the progress for me. It's just a simple way to stay on top of the task here. So one subtask is done, Matrix updates this to 33% progress. Then finally, you have the resources section, which is where you can add additional context around this task. So maybe for this particular task, I need the list of the webinar participants, I need the draft of the email, and so forth. So when you use Matrix, you can actually attach all types of resources, including links to SharePoint, OneDrive, or even emails. Now, speaking of emails, I'm going to switch context a little bit and talk about the number one reason why customer comes to Matrix, which is email prioritization. So here I have my Outlook, and so if you have Outlook, you can install the Matrix plugin. Now, one of the challenges that I face with emails in particular is that I can't always respond to the emails at this point, right? So let's just say you get an important email from a customer and the customer is asking for a quote, and there's no way you can respond to it at this moment. Yes, you can respond sort of like a preliminary message or something like that. But let's just say you actually have to go and involve other people and so on. So what do? You flag the emails. That's the one thing that people will do all the time. You can mark it as unread, and then you can just hope that you remember, right? None of those things are actually particularly effective, because if you have 5 flag emails, sure, they're fine. You have 50 flag emails, and suddenly it doesn't matter anymore, right? There's a phrase that says, if everything is important, then nothing is important. And so it's the same thing that applies to emails. If everything is flagged, then the flag itself is meaningless. So when you get an email, instead of actually just flagging it, what you do is you click on this apps right here, click on Matrix, turn emails into tasks, which is our extension for prioritizing email. When you click on that option, you get the following right here. You get to choose to open Matrix or prioritize email. So go ahead and click prioritize email. On the right-hand side, a panel opens up. And what this allows me to do is actually I can convert this email into a task. As you can see, it pre-fills its information for me. I can say the item name, which grabs from the email itself. I can even update this as needed. I can choose what project it goes in. So maybe it's an email from a customer and maybe it's related to a certain task for them. And then I can even prioritize it into what quadrant right here. I can assign to another person, and then I can set a due date. And so now what happens is I click capture email. And by doing that, I've converted this email into a task. I've assigned it to the right person. I've put it in the right project. I have a due date on it, and I prioritize it. So as you can see, I'm not flagging an email. Instead, it's on my calendar. I know exactly when it's coming up. I'll see it on my Matrix agenda, and I'll get a reminder to make sure that I work on it. And then not only that, in the resources section here, that email is uploaded. So when I assign this to my coworker, they can just open the email and respond to the customer, or they can upload the link to OneDrive or SharePoint that includes the draft of the response to the customer, or files, or whatever it is that you have. So Matrix gives you that complete flexibility. So as you can see here, I'm not worried about having that email being flagged or not, right? I've really put it into the context of the rest of my work. Now, what if you get an email and you already have a task open? So what Matrix allows you to do too is actually you can do the same thing, but now instead of prioritizing the email, you can attach this email to an existing task. So you see how I can search for the task here and hover over it and click attach. The reason why this works is that I might have multiple emails all linked together in one centralized place. And then not only that, I have so many other resources and so forth. And my coworker will actually know where it is within the context of the work, because you've seen this where you get an email, you forward to somebody, you don't know if they've read that email because they have the same problem as you. They have so many emails that they're receiving. They don't have on their calendar because when you forward to them, you can't put on their calendar. And so by doing this, you actually keep your entire team on one centralized platform and know exactly what it is that you're working on. So that's probably the #1 reason why customer comes to Matrix. And so if you use Outlook, you have to install our extension because it automatically syncs with everything, into your one centralized place in Matrix. So here I'm going to go back to my Matrix. As you can see, I click on customer A task. That email is right here that we just created a few seconds ago. The chat here, it's assigned to my coworker. The notes section has the email snapshot, and I can click on this email file to open the email and respond to it as needed. And you can see the due dates that we've set. And then again, what I can do is actually check this out. I can go to the chat, and I'm going to say remind everyone daily. So Matrix applies this natural language not just to the item name itself, but also to the chat. So what that allows you to do is when I say remind everyone daily, it will set a reminder to remind every person who's involved in this task. So not only is it a reminder for myself, but also for my coworker. So let's talk about what happens when you have reminders and then assignments and so forth. On the left-hand side here, what you can see is actually I have a couple of things that opens up. These are called alerts. Alerts are things that require my attention. So for example, I have something called new assignments. If I click on that, I will see, oh, someone assigned me a task. So for example, my coworker that I just delegated that email to, guess what? When they open Matrix, they'll see new assignments and they'll see exactly what that task is, and they can click on that and be able to open the task and then respond to it as needed. And then the other thing is actually what's called mentions. So the difference between mentions and assignments are the following. Let's say if you take a task, and that's very important, and you assign to person A, but you need another person from another department to also be notified of changes. That's when you mention them. So that's sort of the difference. So I'll go back to this task right here for you to see. I have this update on project documents. I'll click on the bottom left here. I'm going to mention, and so I'll say, Tyler, I know you wanted to get updates on this, right? So now Tyler is mentioned. He's added as a follower to this task. And then when Remy finishes this task or updates it, my coworker will also get those notifications. And so sort of those are the differences. The other thing too is actually I get to see what's overdue. So when I click on this, it takes me to what's called my agenda. So Matrix actually has a very comprehensive way for you to understand the entire scope of your work. Let me step back and explain a little bit. I talk about projects and I talk about, all these projects here. I got what, maybe 20 projects here. In my work account, I have more than 300 projects. And what happens is that when you use Matrix, you might start out with, a few projects, 5 or whatever, but over time, those will grow. There's no way for you to go and click through every single project every single day to know what's important, nor what to work on, right? So Matrix has a series of views that gives you perspectives. So let me explain. The alerts view tells you the items that requires your attention. The my item view tells you what are all the tasks that you have that essentially are relevant to you right now. And then the agenda tells you what are all the tasks that you have either due this week or that are overdue. And then on the top right here, I can actually click on this button and I can choose item I own or items I follow. So let me give you the difference. Let me explain the difference. What happens is that if you're a manager and you assign a task to your direct reports, right? They will be the owner of the task and it'll show up on their agenda. But you might want to know, wait, what are the status of all the tasks that I've assigned to my 5 or 10 direct reports? And that's the difference. So when you choose item I follow, it'll show you the agenda, not just for the tasks that you're responsible for, but all the tasks that you assign to others as well. Now, if you're mostly individual contributor, you might not care about the tasks that other people have. And so when you're in the agenda, you choose item I own, and now you can just focus on the things you're responsible for. So that's the difference. So here, as you can see, if I go to the alert, it's the combination of all of these, all the tasks that are assigned to me, the mention me, and all the things that are overdue, and then sort of everything else. And so when we talk about those tasks that are due and the reminders, that's where they all show up. So then on a daily basis, I will get those reminders for my most important tasks until they're done. Now, the beauty of all of this is I can go and I can clear these notifications, but until I get those tasks done, they will keep coming back. And that's how you trick your brain to work on those most important tasks. Now let's talk about projects a little bit more. So earlier I showed you my personal priorities here. Well, let's talk about the type of project you should create. One, I think that all of you should always create a project called My Personal Priorities just to track your own task. And so I'm not talking about, necessarily the stuff that people assign to you and so forth, but it's just a way for you to stay sane, right? We just have so many things on our plate. So sometimes for me, it's important just to have something tangible written down as something I could do, not necessarily that I'm going to do, but I could do. And so when you use Matrix, use that personal priorities projects as a place to capture all those tasks. So down here, just click on the inbox, click on add item. You can do task 1, task 2, due in 3 months, task 3, due in 6 months, and so forth. Now, as you can see, Matrix let me add tasks so quickly. I can brainstorm really, really well with the system. And because I can set due dates using natural language, I can literally type 15 tasks in 30 seconds, right? If it's a matter of how fast you want to type. So now I have all these tasks. What I can do is I can just drag and drop. So now I can reprioritize. I can say these are high priority, medium priority, and low priority. So when I look at my personal priorities, I can actually just resize the quadrant and say, you know what? I just want to look at all my high priority tasks today, or my medium priority, and so forth. So that's one project that you should create. The second project you should create is what's called team priorities. So in team priorities, there's one big difference. When you select that project, you can go to the right-hand side here, and that's called the project details. And you simply click on members, and you can choose who belongs in this project. So let me give you an example. If you're a manager and you have 5 direct reports, I'd strongly recommend that you invite all your direct reports into a project that you guys share with each other. The reason is simple. When they log into Matrix, they can go to team priorities and see the same priorities as you, the same as everyone else. The reason it's so powerful is because it creates a sense of transparency. One of the biggest challenges I've seen customer face is that, especially for organizations that are remote, is that you don't have a common way to know what everyone else is working on. And so you sort of assume that people are working on the right things. And then other people assume that they know what you're working on, and so forth. So by actually creating this team priorities project, it's very, very straightforward. You open the project, you know exactly who's responsible for what task, what's in the high priority quadrants, what's in medium priority, what's in low priority, and then sort of what's everything else. And guess what? When you have a disagreement, that's when you have meetings. You don't have a meeting just to talk about the task that you're working on, because you already see what the status of those tasks are, what the priorities are. Instead, you talk about the disagreements you have within the organization, and you will have much more effective conversations. In fact, when you have your staff meeting, the simple thing to do, project this on the screen. So then everyone will look at it and say, hey, you know what? I see all these priorities. Let's talk about the things in quadrant 1, then quadrant 2, then quadrant 3, right? One of the things that I find fascinating when people have meetings is that you ask them, okay, so imagine if you don't use Matrix, but you have a meeting with people, and then you ask them, oh, by the way, what's on your plate right now? Guess what they're going to say? They're going to say that last thing they work on, they're not going to talk about the most important work. They're just talking about the things that's top of mind. And so what happens is that you have these things that are urgent and these things that are recent, and that overshadows your most important task. And that's a challenge that everyone will face. And so remember that quote, it's not about time management, it's about misplaced attention, right? So our misplaced attention is driven by the recency bias that all of us face. So when you have this team priorities project, there is no such excuse, right? Everyone should be able to go back to their desk, open that project, and see exactly what they should be working on. If it's not, guess what? You can reprioritize it. You can click on the task and you can update it, and you say, hey, maybe this should be more important, right? You can imagine having that conversation directly inside Matrix, and then you and your manager can get to that agreement. But then also, here's another perspective on that, which is if your manager, now let's just say someone else is assigned you task, if your manager asks you to do something, and then you say, hey, I see that you added to my quadrant 1. I already have 5 tasks in quadrant 1. So what do you want me to get rid of? And guess what? That's when suddenly the conversation changes. And they're going to say, wait a minute, maybe this is not as important as I think it is. And that's again how you can facilitate the communication. And all Matrix is doing is just making it tangible. So that's a second project that you should create. Now, one of the things that you probably see here on my screen is I have a couple of different tasks and they all sort of have different um, contexts attached to them. This task right here, for example, I have a star. So when I star a task, it pops it to the top of the list. So it's a way to prioritize within the quadrants itself, right? So then I can choose a fire icon. It's very easy for me to see that it's high priority. And then the other type of project here is actually what's called a linked project. So with Matrix, you can actually prioritize the projects themselves. So what happens is that imagine if I have a project that says, the CEO is requesting a report for Q3. I can actually just right click on it and I can actually convert it to a project. And so now that single task itself becomes another matrix. And that matrix will have its own 4 quadrants. So Matrix allows you to sort of nest all these things together. We don't have a limitation on how much you can nest. And so it's really just linking all these things together as long as it makes sense in the context of your work. So that's how you think about projects. And to create a project, you simply click on projects here, choose create projects, and there are several ways. The first is a blank project. That's very straightforward. Here, if you choose a blank project, you can just come up with whatever name you want. You can choose the basic templates that we have, and then you can also choose a color. The colors don't really affect the functionality. It's just a way for you to stay organized. But also, you can assign the project to the various user group. So you can actually click on this eye icon and it takes you to a user group management page that allows you to associate a project to departments or to various teams. So that's how you create a simple project. You can also use what's called our public templates. So Matrix will actually let you choose from various public templates that we have. And really the public templates is a way to change the name of the quadrants to reflect the work that you have. So for example, 30, 60, 90 day plan, that's actually a really good one for managers because every single quarter, right, you want to go and you want to track the things you want to do this month, next month, and the month after, 30, 60, 90. And so that's how you can choose one of these templates and Matrix will rename those quadrants for you to whatever quadrants that reflect that particular template. When you use Matrix, you can also create your own template. So then when you do that, instead of launching a blank matrix, you can actually choose one. So for example, I can build an internal employee onboarding template. And so within that, I might have 30 tasks already assigned. And those 30 tasks will have different due dates. When you choose this project right here, you can just say the start date for the employee, and Matrix will automatically create the task and set all the due dates and propagate it forward for you. So then the task will be due in 1 week, in 1 month, in 3 months, and so forth. So that's how you can actually leverage Matrix as well. The other thing is you can use our AI system to create the task for you, or you can import from CSV. Matrix gives you really powerful import and export from CSV that allows you to customize the matrix, but also to export all your tasks from a particular matrix and calculate workload. So Matrix will let you actually track the number of hours for every task. If you need to sum up the amount of hours that a particular person worked on a type of task, Matrix will let you do that, and you can use Excel to do whatever it is that you need. So Matrix gives you all those flexibilities with respect to creating projects. So that's how you create different projects in Matrix. Now let's switch gear and talk about higher level views in Matrix. So I mentioned how I have hundreds of projects, and as you use Matrix, you'll have more as well. So then what happens is, there's no way for you to click through all of these and know everything. So instead, on the left-hand side, we have these things called global views. So for example, I can go to the global search view, and this will show me all the tasks I have all the tasks I have across all Matrix. So when I'm here, it shows me everything. I can search for it, but also I can click on my items, and here Matrix will show me all my tasks and let me sort it by due dates, by modified, and so forth. Right? I can click on filters, and then I can actually even add additional columns so that I can find out what are the tasks and when I completed them. So that's a very useful way for me to generate a view of all the tasks I have. But here's another neat trick. Let's just say if my manager asked me, hey, by the way, what did you work on, last month? right? Or, imagine if you're doing a performance review and you just need to capture all the tasks that you worked on. Well, check this out. I can go to filters. I can choose all the things I finish, and then I can click on this multiple selection, choose select all, and I can choose share and email item. And guess what happens? Party Matrix will build me a nice email report with all that information that I have right here, and I can copy and paste it into my workload, work reporting system, whatever that may be, right? Or the same thing happens if I just need to, send an email report to somebody else on the status of different work, and this grabs it across all of my projects. I can combine that with all the filters that I have. When these are the tasks that I finished, but I could have changed that filter to show the tasks that I haven't finished, or the tasks that are overdue, or the tasks that are assigned to different people, and so forth. So Party Matrix gives me that really powerful flexibility right here. Again, this is a really neat feature. So if you go to this top selector, you can choose and you can select all or select some, and then you can bulk edit these tasks as well. So another example might be, I have a series of tasks assigned to a person, but that person is going on leave. I can go to here, select all of those things, go to edit, and then change owner. And then Party Matrix allows me to reassign in bulk to another person. Very powerful way to ensure that I can reprioritize across all of my Party Matrix. It doesn't matter what project it's in, Party Matrix aggregate that together for you. So we used to call this the master list. And I actually really like that naming convention because it helps you understand that this is the list of everything that you have. Party Matrix also has what's called a calendar. When you go here, you can see all the tasks with due dates. And again, this is aggregate across all your projects. You can actually click on here and choose what project you want to see. And you can combine that with filters, and you can choose tasks assigned to anybody as well. So what that allows you to do as a manager is see the workload for your coworkers, for your team members, and so forth. And then you also have the Gantt chart, which actually takes all the projects that you have and build out a timeline that spans across months and years. So the calendar is good for seeing tasks that are due today or this week, but the timeline view is good for seeing tasks that are due this, across quarters and all the way through, let's just say, 2027, 2028, right? Party Matrix build this out for me automatically. And from here, I can even add dependencies to task and so forth. And then one other powerful view in Party Matrix is what's called the one-on-one view. In fact, this is actually one of our top features that customers really, really like. And it does one thing. It flips the entire system around to be people-centric instead of project-centric. I keep on talking about projects and projects and projects. But what happens is that sometimes you just need to know, what are the things I need to do for somebody. So if you're a manager, you want to know, what are all the things that, my direct report is working on for me, right? Because maybe it's a matrix organization and they're working with so many other people, but you just need to know what are the things they work on for you. So when I go to the one-on-one view, I can select anyone that I work with, and Party Matrix automatically aggregate all the tasks that I have in common with that person across all of Party Matrix. So when you need to delegate to them too, you just click on Add Shared Task. You can type the task in here along with natural language for due dates. It automatically assigns it to them, automatically adds you as a follower, so you get updates. You can choose what project it goes in directly from here without having to navigate to a matrix, navigate, create a task, assign to the person, set due date, and so forth. This is meant to be a time saver. And not only that, it gives you a complete perspective for your one-on-one meetings. So if you use Party Matrix and you're delegating tasks, definitely use our one-on-one feature for your meetings, and you'll find that UKIs can actually get to the core of the conversation real fast, right? You're not drilling, you're not opening all these different projects and so forth. You have one centralized place, and then not only that, you can sort by overdue, and then just start talking about all those overdue tasks and say, hey, by the way, what's going on here? Why do you have 5 things that are overdue? Let's solve them, or let's change the due dates or reprioritize them as needed. So I showed you these global views, but what happens is that in every single project too, inside Proto Matrix, you can actually go to the various views too. So as you can see here, I can go to a project, I can click on the quadrant view, which is the primary view that we've been talking about. But as you can see, I actually customize these quadrant names, and you can do that on the right-hand side here. When you select a project, you can click on this and change the name. You can change the quadrant colors if needed. And then what I can also do is I can go to the list view, which is sort of like that master view, but it allows you to see all the tasks within this project. And this is very easy to sort. So it's more like an Excel sheet. And again, from here, I can select tasks, right? And then generate a report or edit them as needed. And then I can actually go to the Kanban view. The Kanban view is actually intended for the transient projects. If you're a project manager and you have 50 tasks and your number one goal is to go from 50 to 0, then the Kanban view will give you that perspective. What are the tasks we have to do? What are the things in progress? And what are the things that are done? The beauty of Matrix is that it has all this information in one centralized place, and you can view it however you want. Your coworker might look at the same task from a very different lens than you do. They might be looking at their calendar, but you might be looking from the Kanban perspective or the Gantt chart perspective, or the list perspective to see what are the tasks that will do. Every view has its own purpose and serves you, for whatever particular goals that you have. So even when you have the same data, then of course you can go to calendar view, and then you have the timeline view. And one of the things I can do in the timeline view is, again, I can click on a task, click on resources. I can link to another item right here, right? So I can go and say, you know what, this item is related, but I'm going to say that this item is blocked by, and I'm going to go ahead and say blocked by revise. So go ahead and link that. And now what happens is Matrix will actually link those items together. And then now later on, when you reload your Gantt chart, it will actually show the timeline and how this item is linked to this item. And then you can just click download or print and take that and put it into your presentation and update your team members very, very easily. Okay, so those are the different ways to look at the same data within Matrix. So let's step over to Microsoft Teams real quick, and we'll wrap this up. When you're inside Microsoft Teams, the cool thing is you can have that one-on-one view directly in the conversation with Teams. So Matrix is probably the most integrated solution within the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. So if you click on this plus icon right here, choose Matrix, choose one-on-one. Now, guess what? You can add this one-on-one for every coworker that you work with. So that means if you're a manager, add this one-on-one for every single one of your coworker. So when you're having a conversation inside Teams, you don't have to open Matrix to know the tasks that they're working on. This one-on-one will show you all the tasks you have with them across all of Matrix, right? You can see how right below my task name is my project. So I can find that, and then I can click on filter, and I can narrow this down as much as I want. And then in the same lens, Matrix actually lets you convert any conversation into a task as well. One of the things that happens for us all the time is we'll have a conversation inside Teams, and then we realize, wait a minute, this needs to be tracked as a task. You can actually just this ... and choose create PM item from any conversation that you have, and Matrix will convert that into a task for you. The same thing happens no matter where you are. So as you can see here, I'm on the web app, but I can install what's called the Matrix extension, the Chrome and Edge extension. So what that allows me to do is I can select any text, right click on it. Actually, in fact, I'll go and show you a different example. I'm on a website. I can right click, select a text, and then right click on it, and then choose to add it to Matrix. So the reason I bring this up is, when we talk about prioritization, we make it easy for you to capture the tasks that you have to do. Because once you've captured it, then you can prioritize it. So Matrix works across everything in Chrome, in Edge, that allows you to capture that information. Okay, so that's how it works inside Microsoft Teams. I can access the entire Matrix application here as well. So you can right click and pin Matrix inside Teams. That means you don't have to come to our desktop app or web app. And then the same thing happens in Outlook. I can actually have Matrix directly pinned on my left-hand side here, and I don't even have to leave Outlook to access all of my Matrix. Now, I'm going to mention Gmail real quick, just in case you don't use Outlook. Well, Matrix has what's called the inbox. And so if you go to Matrix right here, you click on the inbox, well, every single one of you has a unique inbox address. If you save this as a contact on your phone or your Gmail account, If you send an email to that inbox, it'll create a task inside Matrix. So for me, when I'm out and about on my mobile device, I get an email that I need to prioritize. I actually just click forward into my inbox, and then from there, I can actually type due tomorrow, 2 p.m., remind me weekly. I press send, and Matrix will convert that email into a task for me. So this allows you to use Matrix and prioritize email without using Outlook integrations at all. Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap up right now. I'm going to go back to my presentation real quick. Okay, a couple of tips to shortcut your success. If you're a manager, create a project for your staff meetings and screen share during the meetings, like I talked about. If you're managing multiple sites, so let's just say if you're a manufacturing manager and you have multiple locations, multiple geographies, create a project for each site and then a dashboard project to oversee all of it, right? And so that allows you to prioritize the tasks within each of those geographies and each of those locations. You can invite the appropriate plant manager at each of those projects. Everyone will be on the same page. You don't have to have a meeting. You can literally click on every single project and know the priorities for each. If you are someone who managed specific training programs or initiatives, then create a project and template for that. If you're a business owner, create a project for each of your departments. So for example, let's just say you own a business and it's like 50 to 100 people. You go and create a project for marketing, for sales, for customer service, etc. Invite your appropriate team members, each of those projects. Everyone will know exactly what they need to do, right? And from your perspective, you can go to the agenda, you can go to the calendar, and you know exactly, the tasks that are open and the tasks that are behind schedule. And so it's so important to have that visibility without having to get everyone in a room to just to be on the same page. Matrix track those tasks, and you get to see the priorities of those as well. And then lastly, if you're an individual contributor, make sure you create a project for your promotion request. It's actually really interesting because all of us tend to work so hard on so many different things, but at the end of the day, are we working on the things that actually gets us to the next stage of our career? So I actually recommend that you create a project for that. In fact, that's a good use of our AI system where you just go and create a project with AI and say, I want to be promoted to senior project manager, right? And Matrix will create a series of tasks for you for your specific job function that you can potentially follow as a guideline. And so what to do now, make sure you sign up for Matrix, make sure you install our apps for Teams and Outlook. Download the desktop app, the Windows and Mac app. It helps you stay top of mind. And not only that, when you get notifications, it'll actually send notifications in Mac and Windows as well. Create a project to highlight your priorities. Make sure you set those due dates and reminders. Make sure you ask your colleagues to also prioritize their tasks. As I mentioned to you, we tend to assume we know what everyone's working on. Make it explicit, write it down, and then compare notes. And then set 1 hour each week dedicated to reviewing your priorities. This is extremely important. All you have to do is spend 1 hour a week inside Matrix, and you'll be on top of everything you have to do. And then lastly, make sure you compare notes with your coworkers, especially your manager, especially your direct reports. So going back to success, I'm saying the success with Matrix, make sure that you check Matrix every single week. Make sure that all the team members are aligned on key tasks. That's your number one goal in all of this. Make sure that your important emails are prioritized, delegated, and have proper due dates. And then make sure that if you need to know what people's priorities are, you can log into Matrix, look at the appropriate projects, and know the priorities. And if it's not in there, that's what you need to fix. You need to put it in one centralized place because you don't want to have priorities scattered across 15 different things. That's not going to work. As a reminder of your checklist today, focused on your personal projects. Over the next few days, focus on your team priorities, and then finally start to reprioritize. Start to actually be in the habit of reviewing your priorities, and then make sure that you eliminate those time wasters. Okay, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much for your time today.